Hello, how are you? Welcome to the new channel. Hi, this is Thunderhawk Coaching, and I'm William Thunderhawk. And today, I'm going to talk to you about how habits work. So I'm sure we've all heard about habits before, right? We've kind of heard habits are useful, habits are important, but like, what are they, right? Like, how do habits actually work? So there's a structure to habits that we may all know quite well. That's often, there's a cue initially that triggers a routine, and it leads to a reward. Okay, so that's the fundamental of kind of how habits work, right? And there's kind of specific neural pathways that are activated in this, the autopilot part of the brain, the basal ganglia, for example, transfers the routine from the prefrontal cortex, and that handles complex thought, which then allows the action to be performed without conscious thought. Okay, these are really important aspects to understand when we kind of think about building habits, right? And I think a lot of people talk about how important habits are to build, and I agree with this, and the neuroscience is pretty sound on this. But I want to talk about this more from like an actionable point of view, right? Like, what gets in the way of building habits? And I think that there are a lot of like real like emotional challenges that we don't think about when we think about habits. So something I want to outline here really quickly is that habits are really powerful, I think, because they reduce the amount of like cognitive effort our brains are required to use to process thoughts and actions. This is super important when we want to build a life that can sow seeds for us in a positive, healthy, consistent way, right? But I think an aspect a lot of us neglect when we really think about habits is the emotional profile of like what we've got going on, okay? So something I feel that really interrupts this kind of loop of the cue, routine, reward is that actually a lot of us are in a lot of autopilot routines from the basal ganglia, which leads us to not actually being able to kind of snap out of it, have moments of awareness, right? So a lot of you may think, I don't have any habits right now, or my habits suck, but like actually you're probably, if you're anything like me, stuck in this huge range of habits, right, that actually aren't that useful for you. And something I really want to put down here as a key point that I think is important when we think about growing, think about developing and breaking out of these habits is, what habits do we currently have that are getting in our way? What kind of moments in our lives do we live on repeat and think the least about? These are points of reflection. These are points where we need to increase our awareness, right? When we feel the awareness slipping and we're like not doing anything, then that's what we need to look at. And I'm going to give you guys some really concrete examples today. So for myself, for example, when I think about building healthier habits, something that's like really common, I've seen in a lot of people I know and a lot of people I've worked with as a coach is the kind of the morning routine, the evening routine, right? Either a morning routine or an evening routine, like it's non-existent, they feel, or kind of sucks, right? And some examples I've heard of are like, I kind of wake up and I immediately grab my phone. And I don't know if you guys feel this, right? But it's a really common habit. We wake up, we go to our phone, we're kind of bored, right? One of the challenges with that is that you're having this cue, routine, reward loop negatively reinforced, okay? And by that I mean the state that your phone will put you in will be different. So states are really important with routines. Because a question I want you guys to consider when we're thinking about building healthier routines and healthier habits is what kinds of behaviors are being reinforced through my habits? What kinds of states are being reinforced through my habits? So to come back to our example earlier, we have the habit of picking our phone up first thing in the morning and say we scroll into TikTok. What do we think does to our mind? What do we think happens there when we wake up and we look at our phone? We immediately are cueing our minds in that routine reward cycle to seek a shorter reward. Okay, so if your mind is seeking shorter, quicker rewards, guys, you're not going to be able to do things that require longer reward cycles, okay, in your day. And that is going to make life hard, right? So I don't know if you're at work or school and you're like trying to engage with the work in front of you, or just trying to like be present in relationships or interactions. But it's like really hard, right? When you're like used to scrolling through constant streams of information. And this makes us overwhelmed. Like this kind of numbs us out, right? There's a lot of science that backs up how like the default mode network, for example, in the back of our brain turns off a lot when we're engaging with technology. And that aspect of the mind is kind of like contributes to, because the mind's complicated, to our understanding of ourselves, right? Our understanding of who we are, how we're moving through the world, and how we can like navigate our own emotions. And if we're reinforcing this habit, if we come to the top of it, of not being able to have a slower paced mind and have a shorter reward cycle, then we're going to really struggle to initiate different habits that we might think are amazing, right? Like might think that are good for us, right? We say like eating healthy is good for us. Going to the gym is good for us. Working out, working on a new skill, or like learning how to play an instrument, or studying for a test. All of that's a lot harder when your mind and your habits and your cue reward routine cycle is really orientated towards these kind of shorter stints. So to recap, what I would encourage for you guys to do initially is be aware of what you do as you wake up. What is the first thing you do when you wake up? Do you go to your phone? Do you go to the bathroom? Do you play a video game? Do you boot up your PC? What happens for you when you don't do that? Because that's where a lot of the learning is. And there's like a ton of extra nuance here, and it's some really like hard stuff to navigate. So if you need some additional support over at Thunderhawk Coaching, we provide one-on-one coaching. So you can find all the information in the description. But building these habits is really important when we think about like actually building like more of a fulfilling life. And this is like the overarching like goal here, right? I think for a lot of us when we build habits, but also a goal at Thunderhawk Coaching. We want to develop our ability to, I don't know, be proud of ourselves, to like feel like we're providing value in the world, like feel like we matter, right? I believe that's what we fundamentally all want. And when we have habits that are getting in the way of that, we need to like build awareness with them so then we can take control of this cue routine reward cycle. Okay? So something I'm going to encourage for you guys here when you finish this video is just come off of YouTube for a second and put a timer on your phone and wait for 5 minutes and see what your head does. Okay? Because that might tell you a lot about what that cue routine reward cycle looks like right now for you. Okay? So, final summary. Look at your cue routine reward cycle. What cues are in your environment that make you engage with habits? Okay? When you engage with habits, How do you feel afterwards? Right? That's really important to be aware of, because if you're not, you can end up feeling terrible and you don't know why. Right? And it's hard to navigate this stuff. Number 3, be aware of what you're doing in the evening, in the morning. Think about that a lot, because that's going to set up the mindset for your day. That's going to set up the neurochemistry in your head for the day. That's going to set up how your basal ganglia is going to respond to the environment you're in, right? It's going to affect a lot of those complex thoughts that we all have, okay? So keep those in mind. You've been wonderful. I've been Will. Thunderhawk Coaching, out.